So that was Jeremy Hunt. What of Team Johnson? Well, I'm joined by the man running their campaign, Iain Duncan Smith. And what's your take on Mr Barnier's comments?
Well, as I understand it, Mr Barnier made these comments before the leadership election actually began, which isn't quite so obviously known. So in a sense, he wasn't, I don't think, commenting about what leadership candidates were saying. I think he was talking about what his view was of their deal. But all I would say is, he would say that, wouldn't he? I mean, he's in the business of hoping that somehow he gets his deal through, but it is dead. And the point about it is it's not a case of renegotiating it. Boris Johnson has made it clear we're leaving, deal or no deal, on the 31st, but we're not reopening their deal. If we have anything at all, it's a free trade arrangement we would like with them. We should start it straight away. So Boris has been clear about that from the word go.
Doesn't it mean, though, in effect, it will have to be no deal, because Mr Barnier is saying it's the withdrawal agreement, that's the best on offer. If you don't like that, then the only other option is no deal.
Well, it's quite clear. Boris Johnson has made it absolutely clear. This is not about the EU, it's not personalities. Monsieur Barnier is entitled to say what he likes. The reality is, though, that that deal that he talks about died because it was voted down in the Commons 3 times. And essentially it is no longer in existence as far as we're concerned. Boris Johnson's made it clear we're leaving. That's what we're planning to do on the 31st, come what may, as he said. But he would like, if the EU really wants to do an arrangement, to do a free trade arrangement, and he's already made that clear. So Boris has yet not got into discussions with them. He has not yet, if he gets elected, and we don't know what the result will be, he has not yet made any arrangements with them. But so for the moment, as I say, you would expect Monsieur Barnier to say that. He's entitled to do that, but he was always going to say what he said. He isn't suddenly going to come out and say, great news, I'm ready to do a deal, because that would be a bad negotiating stance.
How do you respond, though, to the fact that EU leaders clearly think Britain is bluffing when it comes to no deal? They say you haven't put in place the preparations, Mrs May didn't even mention it, you're not serious.
Well, of all the things to come out of these interviews, the posturing around the deal is not the issue. Boris has been very clear. If he's elected as Prime Minister, we're leaving on the 31st, come what may. But what was really interesting about this is not what they say about the deal, but it was the opening up to know that, one, they knew from the word go we hadn't completed our planning and that we'd stalled on it, which I think is an indictment of the Chancellor and many others. It meant we had no negotiating position at all. And two, that as far as they were concerned, the Prime Minister never once said, we are able to leave without a deal. So it was off the table pretty much, it appears, from day one. So Boris Johnson has been correct in what he said, which is you can't possibly talk to them as a partner if they have no knowledge of your bottom line. And the answer is we need to make preparation. Boris has said it will be accelerated. We will be ready to leave by the 31st. That's the key principle.
And yet Mr Barnier clearly believes, to quote him, there will be consequences. There will be financial consequences, there will be economic consequences and human consequences if we choose to leave without an agreement.
Yeah, again, I don't mind what Monsieur Barnier says about consequences. There are always consequences to every action you take.
But is he right?
I don't actually believe that he is right in terms of what can happen. And as Boris Johnson has said time and time again, we are open to an arrangement, but not the deal that they've got on the table. What we want is a simplified process which is around free trade. He said it on the platforms, he said on television. And I bear in mind, these comments were made by Monsieur Barnier before Boris Johnson has actually entered the race and a platform and made his position clear. So it's up to them how they behave. But if they want to avoid their consequences, then they will need to do an arrangement with us. But otherwise, we will be ready to go. The public has said, leave by the 31st. Boris Johnson is the only one to have said, we will leave, come what may, by the 31st. Then we can take on Mr Corbyn and the Marxist Labour Party.
However, Mr Johnson has also said he believes no deal would be, quotes, vanishingly inexpensive. We hear from the OBR today that it would plunge Britain into recession. We hear from the Chancellor that it would be even worse than a recession.
Sorry if I'm laughing, because every time I hear the Chancellor enter the fray on this one, I just wonder whether he can be more miserable about anything. And he has now managed to be more miserable than he's been before, which is pretty deep misery, actually, I have to say. I don't pay any attention to it at all, because these are cooked-up forecasts at the end of the day. You take the extremes of the bottom end of a forecast and you rail about that. Truth is, in all the forecasts that we've had so far, no matter what even the pessimistic ones say, the economy still continues to grow. Just they think it might grow less than it would have done, but that's a speculative point. The truth is, Boris Johnson has been clear. The British people made a democratic decision, leave on the 31st with or without a deal. He's the only one that will deliver that. That's why I back him and support him, and that's why the British people, I think, will recognise they have now at last, I hope, if he gets elected, a Prime Minister who will stand by his word.
But isn't the truth you're just ignoring the comments of the likes of the OBR? The OBR is an independent body, it doesn't have any axe to grind in this debate, and it clearly states on what some view as a fairly benign no-deal scenario that the economy will shrink by 2%.
As I say, we will see. As everything else, forecast to forecast. Many forecasts have been completely wrong over the last few years. In fact, I think almost every forecast by anybody from the, literally from the International Monetary Fund right the way through to the OBR and everything else, these have often been quite wrong. In fact, in some cases, budget forecasts didn't last 6 months after the budget. I simply say we'll take that all with a pinch of salt. What we do know, which is out-trumps anything else, is that the British people voted to leave with or without a deal by the 31st of October. We've already delayed it now. We're meant to leave on the 29th of March. Boris Johnson has made it clear our number one job as politicians is to deliver on what the public said. And he has a very simple principle. We leave by the 31st of October. By doing so, we end this argument, bring the public back together and unite them. And then we take on what is the biggest threat, Marxist Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn.
Iain Duncan Smith, thanks very much indeed. Well, robust response from Jeremy Hunt and also robust response from Team Johnson.
Norman, thank you very much. Norman there in Westminster.